Peter Lee. I'm the editorial director for Georgia.gov, and I've got 2 cups of coffee in me, so I'm ready to go, ready to give you all a good primer on how to clean up your website. And the title of it is Clean Up Your Website, and I mean it. We're going to get down into a serious talk about your content, about what's going on your website, what you need up there on your website, and really, more importantly, what you don't need on your website. How many here have actually bought a new house before? Didn't you love the feeling of going into a brand new house, having all of your stuff there, putting away everything in your boxes, and having everything exactly where you wanted it? You know, you could have had anybody come over, the queen, everything was top-notch, beautiful, especially if you moved into a brand new house. You know, everything smelled right, the floors were new, the cabinets were new. It's a lot like a new website. You get a new website, everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. The content is brand new, and everything looks really good. You're really excited about your website. What happens in 6 months? What happens in a year? It's like an episode of Hoarders. You start putting up content, and as Nikhil said, sometimes you just don't know where to put up content, so you'll just put it in a miscellaneous pile, you'll just put it in quick links, you'll put it in important links. There won't be any part of your information architecture that you'll actually put it in. The commissioner will want to put something up ASAP. They'll want to put a message up from the board chair, they'll want to put up a welcome message, a vision statement, a mission statement, and all of these things start adding up on your website. In the midst of doing all of that, you're forgetting about all of the content that you put up 6 months ago. It's starting to stink a little bit. It's at the bottom of the pile, and you start noticing that, well, things just aren't looking good anymore, and you've got visitors coming over, and they're looking at this. You know, you don't have time to clean up, because visitors are really coming to your website every single day. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people are coming to your website. So if the queen is coming over and your house looks like this, you're in big trouble. Well, for some people, that's what their website looks like. And that's the user experience that some customers are getting. And I think Captain Picard said it best in an episode of Star Trek. I don't think he really said this, but here's the problem. You got way too much content. I'm a Star Wars guy, so this is just one of the Captain Picard memes we've got going on around the internet right now. But yeah, there's just way too much content on our websites right now, and everyone's guilty of it. Georgia.gov's guilty of it. GTA's guilty of it. All of the websites really in state government and also the federal government. You go to any website, and there's always room for improvement where content can be cut. There's just way too much content going on, and it just makes things a lot more difficult for people to find. About 2 weeks ago, I attended a conference in Minnesota called Confab. It was focused all on content strategy, and a person named Jerry McGovern spoke at this conference, and I became a huge fan. So you will be hearing his name quite often during this presentation, because I'm still on a Jerry McGovern high. He wrote a book called The Stranger's Long Neck. And I was reading that book, and this quote came across and just really struck me. If your customers can't complete the top task they came to your website to complete, your website fails. Now let me repeat that. If your customers can't complete the top task they came to your website to complete, your website fails. Doesn't matter about the welcome message, doesn't matter about the commissioner's statement or your mission statement. If they came to the child support site to find out where their child's check is and they couldn't find it, if they came to public health's website wanting to find some stuff about Ebola and couldn't find it, then your website fails in general. So what Jerry McGovern did, has anybody ever read the book The Long Tail? Chris Anderson wrote it. And his approach to the long tail was that in any kind of business, you sell a lot of just a few things. And stores like Hi-Fi Buys and Circuit City did a really good job of that for a long time. They sold TVs and they sold stereos. But That's about all they did. And then what happened? Amazon.com came along, and first they started selling just books, but then they started selling other things. And you can find pretty much anything you want on Amazon. And so what Amazon started doing is taking advantage of this long tail. They started selling a lot of little things, maybe just 5 or 6 quantities of these items, but there were just so many of them out there. They started making money off of these things and started overtaking some of those bigger brick and mortar stores. And they're, of course, one of the top websites in the world right now because of the breadth of not just the big sellers that they have, but the breadth of everything else that they're selling. Well, Jerry McGovern took a look at this, and he also started looking at search analytics. He started looking at Google Analytics and noticed the exact same shape, where people were searching for a lot of things at the beginning and then searching for things like who really killed Kennedy and, you know, really weird things that pop up on your search results if you've ever taken a long look at like the lower thousands position in your search results. There's some really weird things that pop up if you want to take a look at that. Jerry thought, well, we've really got this thing backwards when we're looking at websites. It doesn't really matter what the number 1,000 most searched item was. It doesn't really matter what the most, you know, the 100th most important page on the website was. This is what matters. Your top tasks. What are people really coming to your website for? What are people coming, those top 10 tasks that people are trying to do? And this is what he calls the long neck. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. I want to really see if that works. So anybody here from child support? You're here from child support. We'll talk about you for just a little bit. Nothing bad, don't worry. I took a look at child support's website to see, you know, what their Google Analytics looked like, and then graphed it. Boom, there it is, the stranger's long neck. The top 10 pages on child support site accounted for 87% of all the page views. 87%. And they've got 620 pages total. So your job could be really easy. Get rid of 610 pages and you're hitting 87% of all the page views. Now, of course, I'm not saying get rid of 610 pages. It's not that easy. You do have to have a certain structure to your website, but it's amazing what people really come to your website for. They really are coming to your website for just a handful of things. Most people are. So I took a look at GTA, taking a little bit of our own medicine to see what ours looked like. Ours was a little different. GTA is always a little different, right? But same thing, really. The top 10 pages on GTA's website accounted for 74% of all page views. 3 out of every 4 people who came were looking at one of these top 10 pages. And we have over 1,000 pages total on the GTA website. Pretty amazing, pretty eye-opening that you spend all of this work putting up content, trying to manage all of this content, and people are only really interested in just a handful of things that they're coming to your website for. And you work for your agency, you probably have a good idea of what those things are. You've got probably a call center, you've got people who are managing the front desk phones. You know what people are coming to and asking questions about. And then, of course, you can always look at Google Analytics to find out. Whoops. So really, it's not so much the 90-10 rule or the 95-5 rule that I'm really talking about, but maybe the 80-20 rule really goes into effect. Try to meet 80% of your users' needs with maybe 20% of the content. 80-20 rule works a lot. So let's take another example. Columbia College had 36,000 pages on their website. I have no idea why they would have 36,000 pages on their website. I mean, that's mind-boggling. But they knew that it was too much. And so they got to work on actually trying to get rid of some of their content. And boy, did they ever get to work. They reduced the number of pages on their website from 36,000 all the way down to 944 pages. Bam! 97.4% decrease in the amount of pages that they had. Now that's really getting rid of some content. Now you may think, well, what happened to those 35,000 pages? I mean, surely somebody was looking at them. Surely somebody's missing them, and that, you know, something's going to suffer there. Well, they had some baseline statistics, one of which was inquiries to the admissions office. How many students were actually trying to apply to Columbia College and wanted to get an application and wanted to apply? Well, when they took a look at that statistic after the webpage redesign, 82% increase in web inquiries. So that shows that getting rid of content makes your website much simpler, much easier to use. They were finding what they were looking for and wanted to actually go ahead and apply it to this college. Oops, I'm moving too fast. Who's heard of Marie Kondo? Or the book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying? Let's see, 1 person, 2 people, 3, 4, 5 people. Well, Marie Kondo is from Japan, and she is taking the United States by storm. If you haven't heard her yet, you probably will pretty soon. She's been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and she's got this very simple way of tidying up your home. So if your home looked like hoarders, you may want to start taking notes here. Her method is very simple. You take a basic item in your house. Let's take clothing. Take everything out of your wardrobe, everything out of your drawers, put it all in the middle of your floor. Every single piece of clothing you can find. You take each piece of clothing, you touch it, and you ask yourself, does this spark joy in me? Does this really make me happy? Am I happy with this piece of clothing? And so her idea is that if it doesn't spark joy in you, if it doesn't make you happy, you don't store it away in storage. You don't put it up in the attic. You get rid of it. It's gone. You put it in a garbage bag and you either give it to Goodwill or you throw it away. And you do that for clothing. You do that for books. You do that for accessories. You do that for mementos. Everything in your house, you basically do the same thing and apply the same technique. And that's really that's really what her technique boils down to, is seeing if something is really worthwhile in your house. And here's a picture of her actually going through someone's jewelry, not literally going through someone's jewelry and taking what she wants, but getting everything together and having the person sit down and touching each piece of jewelry and finding out whether it sparks joy in them. And she's done just some amazing results. I mean, people have walked out with just dozens and dozens of garbage bags full of stuff that they just realized that, not just that they didn't need it, but it just didn't spark joy in them. It didn't make them happy. And so once they're done with this process, they're just stuck with the things that they really enjoy. And here's a good example. The top, here's a bedroom that's pretty cluttered. I mean, it's not like hoarders, but there's a lot of stuff in there. Took everything off the shelves, and here's the end product. I mean, the stuff that was up here in picture number 1 is no longer in the house. You've got a clean, organized room. And that's what she does. So, that's a nice parallel to something else. Your content. We can do what's called a content inventory. If you send in a support ticket to support.georgia.gov, we can actually create a content inventory for you that will take every content item you have on your website, images, PDFs, Excel files, HTML files, and put them in a spreadsheet. And it'll give you a lot of other information, such as the size of the file, the date it was created, the word count. It also integrates with Google Analytics, so you can actually get a sense of how many people have actually visited this page over a certain amount of time. And so it gives you a good idea of who's visiting what page and how many times. And it also gives you a bird's eye view of how much content you have. You may be shocked at how much is really up there. And so what I'm asking you to do with this content inventory is sort of what Marie Kondo does. And I forgot to tell you that Kondo has actually, her last name has become a verb. You condoize your house. It's become such a buzzword. So what I want you to do is actually condoize your inventory. You don't actually have to physically touch each content item and ask if it sparks joy in you. I'm sure a lot of content on your website does not really spark joy in you for some reason. But look at it and make an informed decision as to whether or not you really need this content on your website. Does this spark joy in the customer? Does the customer really need this? Look at the Google Analytics. Are people actually visiting this page? Look at the last time it was modified. Has it been 6 years since someone touched it? Is it an annual report or a board report from 1998? Does that really need to be up on your website? And so once you start making these decisions, the content inventory then turns into a content audit. And you can actually start deleting items. And that's such a good feeling. It's so cathartic just to actually start getting rid of things. And you've probably done some cleaning up in your home and where you just feel like you've actually accomplished something and gotten rid of some things. And that's what you do in the content audit. You decide that, well, we really don't need this. And really, a content management system is not a document management system. You know, you don't keep documents up there for archival purposes and, well, maybe I'll need it one day. If you really need it one day, download it to your hard drive. Get a Dropbox account. Those are free, and you get like, what, 3 to 5 gigs for free. And start storing some of this content either in the cloud or on your hard drive, because you don't need it up on your website if people aren't looking for it. I strongly encourage you to do this, and not just do it once. Marie Kondo claims that you can actually just condoize your house once, and that's all you need to do. With my house and 2 kids, I think I would probably have to do it, you know, maybe once every 3 or 4 months, you know, because it would just get crowded again. It would just get messed up again. So same thing with a content inventory and a content audit. You can do this over and over again, and just make sure that the most up-to-date content is up there. And maybe you don't have to get rid of everything. Maybe there's some things that you feel are important, but it just hasn't been updated in 3 or 4 years. So you can mark those items for updating, for rewrites, but also make sure that you're deleting some content as well. And it also improves your information architecture. I actually took this slide from a website's information architecture. Nobody in state government. This is a company's website. And it looks more like an electrical schematic. I have no idea. I think the homepage may be up here. It goes down to here. There's some items up here. I wouldn't even know where to start if I actually went to this website. There's so many content items, and it's so convoluted, so difficult to understand. I don't see how the user can actually find things on this website. But it doesn't have to be this way. But they've got so much content, as Nikhil said earlier, they're just throwing things where they think it might want to go. And there's no rhyme or reason to anything. And it's become something like this. You start doing a content audit or a content inventory, you know, your information architecture may look something like this. And this is really what we aim for, is simplicity. FatMax, when Nikhil put that slide up there, I think they had 10 menu items. Just way too many. And you need to make your information architecture, your menu items, as small as possible, as shallow as possible, so that people don't have to dig for stuff and have to make a wrong turn. You remember the old Yahoo where you had to, if you wanted to find something out about the Clash, you had to go to entertainment and arts, and then had to go to music, and then you had to go to 70s music, and then you had to go to punk rock, and then maybe you were in the right place, but then you got to disco, and no, you had to go back up and find somewhere else to go. You know, that was the old way of doing things, and trying to find things through a kludgy information architecture is very difficult to do. So getting rid of content makes your information architecture much more simple. And I've already said this. Using Google Analytics will help immensely. Say, for instance, you're wanting to get rid of some content, and that subject matter expert is just desperately hanging on to it. My mother-in-law is just notorious for this. They're moving houses right now. and she's got so much stuff. It's almost like that episode of Hoarders. But we're going over to her house saying, okay, do you really need 15 yards of this fabric that's been sitting in your house for 20 years and it's dry rotting? Yeah, I think I really need it. Some subject matter experts are like that. Some customer is actually going to want this sometime. I think they're going to actually need this. Well, that's where that content inventory with Google Analytics smashed into it really helps. You can take a look at that and go, well, over the past year, 5 people actually visited this site page. So, the statistics show that people aren't really looking for it. If 5 people over a year are looking at it, that's 5 phone calls we could probably handle. And I don't know, maybe 4 times you actually looked at it. So it's Google Analytics doesn't lie. And so you can actually use that as a weapon to go to some of these subject matter experts and say, look, we really need to pare down, and the statistics are just showing that people aren't looking at this content. So we need to either find another place for it or just get rid of it. Another thing that you need to think about is whether the content that you do have, let's say you've already done your content inventory and your content audit, you've gotten rid of it, the existing content, is it really useful? Does it serve the purpose that you really wanted it to serve? Colleen Jones is head of a company called Content Science, and there's a table outside with some of their products that they have, and one is called Content Works. And it's an evaluation tool that you can actually have up on your website that will ask customers questions about the usefulness of the content in such areas as sales, technical support, expertise, finding out whether or not your content is actually working and meeting their needs. And then it will actually give you a dashboard, a score as to how well you're doing on your content. You get a low score, you may want to take a look at exactly how this content is written and whether or not people are understanding the content. There are some areas for comments where people can actually put in reasons why they didn't think that the content had expertise or offered enough support for them. So that's a good tool that we're just starting to roll out. We tried it for Georgia Gov as a pilot, and we'll actually start making that available pretty soon to agencies as well if you're interested in doing that. Okay, so now that we have cut the number of content items, I'm asking you to do one more thing, and that's cut the number of words that you have on your existing pages in half. And now I know that you're just thinking, oh my God, no way. There's no way. I've said everything that I need to say, and it's right there on the web page, and it's pretty easy to understand. You really shouldn't expect me to cut the number of words in half. Well, actually, yes. And there are studies that back this up, that less is actually more. These are scientific studies that were done by usability specialists. Jacob Nielsen, really the godfather of usability, says that less than 20% of the text content on a page is actually read. And for a former journalist and writer, that makes me sad, of course. I want everyone to read everything that I wrote because I spent so much time on it, but they don't. Users don't read on the web, and you all know that because you're users of websites, and you scan. You just go over a web page and probably 10 seconds try to glean what information you want from it. If there's something that sparks your interest, you may spend another 15 or 20 seconds looking at the bold items or the bullet items and getting the basic gist of what's on the page. Scrolling is another thing. Most visitors scroll through only about 50% of an article's page. So if you've got a nice 1,500 word web page, people aren't reading all of it. They're just going to a certain amount and stopping and just not going forward anymore. So if you've got some really good information at the end, sorry, they're probably not reading it. And then concise, scannable, and objective copywriting resulted in 124% better usability. And that's again Jacob Nielsen. So these are facts that have actually come from scientific studies that The fewer words you have on a web page, the better off you're going to be. Let's take an example. There's nobody here from the feds, right? We can talk about the feds, right? We can make fun of them. Okay, good. Here's an example of a Medicaid fraud letter that used to be sent out to providers who may have engaged in Medicare fraud. And that's the last slide. This was the actual content of the letter. I'm not even going to attempt to read this. I'll put you all to sleep. But you start looking through that and you see these big, huge words like investigators, contractors, regulations, sufficient evidence, prosecuting monetary penalties, imprisonment. Oh my God! If I was a provider, I think I'd be freaking out right now. And it's all in one paragraph. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but nowhere does it actually mention the Medicare providers as a person, as you. It's just talking about providers in general, all in third person. Well, plainlanguage.gov, you remember the big initiative that Al Gore did several years ago, got a hold of this letter and said, yeah, I think we can do better than that. So after they got a hold of it and rewrote it, it turned into this. We will take 2 steps to look at this matter. We will find out if it was an error or fraud. We'll let you know the result. That's pretty much saying the exact same thing without getting into all this, the criminal penalties. I mean, that'll come later if we actually find out that it's fraud. But you don't need to actually say all of those things. And this letter actually resulted in a 75% reduction in the number of words. Wow. I mean, that's getting up there into Marie Kondo territory and Columbia College territory, where they're really getting rid of a lot of words. Well, how difficult is this to do? I mean, you may have some communications people on your team that can actually help you out, but if you're a one-person shop, if you're an IT person, how do you actually start doing these things? Well, I'm going to give you a couple of tips to write better, to write more succinctly, and these are things that'll just come a little bit more easily with practice. First of all, omit needless words. We tend to write long sentences a lot, and if you really start parsing those sentences together, you'll see that there are a lot of words that are redundant. Things like, the speedy dog ran quickly. Well, if it's a speedy dog and it's running quickly, you can just say the dog sped. This is a subject that means a lot to me, maybe. You can really just say this subject. This subject means a lot to me. You can get rid of this is and that. So that goes from five words down to 2. And the reason why is that, I mean, that's just a long way of saying because. So you can actually go from 5 words down to 1 on something like this. There's always an easier way of saying something. Small words are better than big words. And in government, we love big words. Even the word government, oh my gosh. I've tried to do those Microsoft Word grade level. I try to make it a game to where I'll find something that's like 16th grade, which is like, 4th year of college, and try to bring it down as much as possible. And sometimes I can bring it down only to like 10th grade because the word government just shows up too much. And I've yet to find a one syllable word for government. So sometimes we have to use big words, but we don't have to all the time. A lot of times people say we consume products, we consume food. No, we actually eat food. We love the word collaboration. This is a collaboration between the departments of blah, 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 blah. Well, they were actually just working together. Collaboration, not everybody really knows what that means, but working together I think is a lot easier to understand. Individuals, another big word that really, if you have a group of individuals, you just got a group of people. Again, a word that's shorter, a lot easier to understand, and it makes the prose a lot more meaningful and a lot easier to understand. In close proximity to, near. Just simplify, simplify, simplify. Active, not passive voice. We are all guilty of this. sometimes we want to stay as far away from a decision or as far away from something that's going on as possible. And so we try to put us in the back of the sentence as much as possible. The decision was made by the committee to close the school. So the subject is actually buried way down in the sentence. And some reasons for that is it's sometimes just subconsciously, sometimes it's intentional. That you want to focus on the decision, really, and not so much on who made it. But a much easier way, a much more authoritative way to say this is the committee decided to close the school. And I did two things there. I could have said the committee made the decision to close the school, but making the sentence shorter, if you make a decision, you're actually deciding something. So this does make you a little bit more responsible for what's going on, but it really does make the sentence a lot easier to understand. So going back to 6th grade English, if you remember that, subject comes first, then the predicate. Make your sentences like that. It's pretty easy to do. And this is what I was talking about earlier. You. Talk about you in your web pages, because the consumer, the user, the customer, whoever you're serving is reading the web page, so go ahead and address them. Address them as you, as second person and not third person. I went into a DFACS office once and saw this sign, customers are required to sign in before being seen by a caseworker. Well, who's reading that? The customer's reading it, and they're being treated like a third person. So a much easier way of saying that would be, please sign in and a caseworker will see you. Users really appreciate the you part of it, where they're actually being addressed and not being an invisible third party in a room. So try to use you as much as possible. A few more things, and I had on this a little bit earlier. Bullet points tend to break up a lot of gray text if you've got a lot of long paragraphs, especially if you've got lists. Always use bullet points, because they're a lot easier for the user to scan and take a look at. And then if you actually do have some really important parts of your web page that you want people to pay attention to, use bold. Don't use italics, because italics on the web are really hard to read. But use bold text, and that'll make it stand out, and people will actually have their eye go across that and understand those parts a little bit more. Jerry McGovern again. Come back to him. This is something I just learned 2 weeks ago. I too was one that thought that you had to have a picture up on your web page, and he's starting to set me straight on this. You know, contrary to what we used to think and what we were told in the newspaper business, at least, a picture is not worth 1,000 words. Studies are now showing that the text really still rules the web. People are looking for headlines. People are looking for that bold text, the big text, so they'll actually know what's going on the web page. They don't really want to see these nice canned stock photos that we think look really cool of all the corporate team looking proud and almost godly up here. We've all seen the picture of the generic CRM person answering the phones with a smile, because everybody we talk to on the help desk lines are always very happy, right? And then this really isn't a stock photo, but I did find it from a federal government website. Again, I'll pick on the feds. The old grip and grin, where you're getting a certificate, you're getting a check from someone, and you're holding it and smiling it, and somebody important is giving it to you. We have a lot of that from the governor's office or from the sheriff's association, maybe. And I mean, this is something that the user may not really want to see. I mean, the users are really, remember what Jerry said earlier, they're coming for a couple of top 10 tasks. And seeing someone get a certificate or getting a check from someone is not probably one of their top 10 tasks. So some of these pictures that we put up on our website, those rotators that we have, aren't really lending anything toward the content that we actually have on our website. Sometimes we just put it up there because we think the text needs to be broken up. But content still rules on the web. And even though pictures are a part of content, a lot of times we don't really take into account what the picture means in relation to the content. Now sometimes, say for instance with GEMA, if you've got a picture of tornado damage and you're talking about GEMA's response to a tornado, that may be an appropriate use of images. So I'm not saying that we need to get rid of all images, but we certainly don't need to have as many as we do. This is a perfect example of a website that does not have images. They have gotten a lot of kudos from this. Gov.uk. If you see, no images right there at the top of the fold. I think there are a couple of images down at the bottom. But all it is content. Where do you need to go? They've got the search bar right up front, which is suspiciously a lot like what we did 3 years ago. But that's all there is. They don't need any kind of picture of Big Ben or the River Thames anywhere on the front page of their site. All it is content. And then, as I've said, they've gotten a lot of kudos for this. If you come to some of the GOVTalks that we've had, you probably heard me talk about this before. PDFs are not your friend. We love PDFs. We love them. We love them because they look like a sheet of paper. And we can open them up, and we can press print, and we can go to our printer, and we can actually hold a piece of paper that looks just like the thing that was on the computer. And now we have our paper. We love paper. Well, that used to be pretty good when desktops ruled and we wanted to print out and archive and file everything away. But PDFs, not so much anymore. And there are a couple of reasons why. One reason is mobile. You try to bring up a PDF on a mobile site, on a mobile phone, on iPhone or Android, and you get something that looks like this. And I'm sure everyone can read all this, right? Yeah. So we've all learned probably the whole pinch and zoom thing, where you go like this to make things bigger, make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until you can finally read something. But now, what do you have to do? You have to horizontally scroll to read and then go back. It's almost like a typewriter where you're going to the end, then you have to go all the way back to the beginning, read again, and then you have to start scrolling vertically to read the rest of it. It's a usability nightmare. So PDFs from that aspect are really bad. Another bad example of PDFs on the web are these things. Scanned PDFs, where someone has taken their lovely sheets of paper and put it into a scanner, made it into a PDF and thrown it up on the web. It's an image. That's all it is. And Google does not know what any of this says. I can barely read it actually because it's scanned so badly, but it's something about customer can contain bills and the information from the AAA. Google's not going to find any of that. So if you actually want your PDF to be indexable and actually have Google recognize what's on that PDF, these scanned PDFs are just not going to work. So you're actually going to have to take an actual Word document of the file, convert it to a PDF, to where those words will actually show up. So those are two really big reasons why you shouldn't use PDFs. I've seen a lot of other examples of just one-page PDFs, and unless it's a flyer or a poster that you want people to print out and put up in their office or take with them, if it's a form maybe, I can understand one-page PDFs, but I've seen notices that are just one-page PDFs. Turn them into a site page in Drupal. And even if there are 10 or 15 page PDFs, we've got a book module that you can actually use that'll have pagination and can actually divide documents up into sections and actually have it show up on a web page. So there are ways around PDFs, and I would encourage you to take a look at all the PDFs on your site and decide whether, one, you need them, and two, whether they can be transformed into some sort of HTML page. No Flash. Zero. None. Flash just does not work on the web anymore. It may work on some desktops still, but on your mobile phone, on Android, you're going to get something that says, this site requires Flash. And it's not gonna play. So there are ways around that as well. You can convert things to HTML5. You can convert a Flash movie into a YouTube video, and we can help with that. If you do have these Flash objects on your site and need help, just fill in a support request, and we can help you convert those. So why are we doing this? Why am I telling you all of these things? One reason I've talked about a lot already is mobile. Child support. 3 out of every 4 people who are now visiting the site are accessing it through a mobile device. 75%. That's amazing. And for a lot of you, that number is approaching 50% where you're reaching your mobile moment, where almost half of them are accessing it through a phone or a tablet. So mobile really does matter, and we need to make sure that our pages are customized and optimized for mobile. So make your pages as tiny as possible. We've already talked about cutting the content. Cutting the content will make the page download that much quicker. Optimizing photos and videos. There are ways that you can make your JPEGs smaller. This is on your handout, jpegoptimizer.com. I've seen 1 2 megabyte JPEGs on some pages, and you can easily just go in and make that, a 100K file as opposed to a 1 megabyte file. And if you still need those PDFs, if you're desperately just hanging on to them, you can actually optimize those as well. There's a tool that will cut the size of those PDFs as well. So make use of those tools and make the mobile experience a little bit easier for people to handle. I'm running out of time, so I'll just hit this really quickly. You're going to reach that point where people will going to go into Costco and Sam's Club and start bringing in more content by the shopping cart loads. And they're going to say, here, put this on the web. It needs to go up. And you probably already reached this. And you don't want to be the bad guy in all this. You don't want to say, well, does it really need to go up there? I've been in that position when I did GTA's content, or I'd really get into some serious discussions with people as to why do you need this up here? Well, there's some ways that you can circumvent that. Make a content request form where people actually have to justify why something needs to go up on the web. Who is this for? Who's going to actually read it? What's the estimated number of people you think are actually going to read this content? Make them think it out before they actually submit the request. That may actually get rid of some of those requests before they actually get to you. Another way is through a governance body. You don't have to be the bad guy. You can have 3 or 4 other people be the bad guy too. Have a governance body meet, once a week, once every 2 weeks, and go through all the content requests and judge as a group whether or not that content should go or stay, should go on the website or not. So I'm going to go back to this question one more time. Why are we doing this? I talked about mobile. Yeah, we all know mobile matters, right? But why are we really doing this? This is why. Public trust in government is at an all-time low. And people don't like dealing with the government. They don't like going into offices. They don't like standing in line. They don't like having to deal with this. And it's nothing personal. It's just government in general. But they have to do it. And they come to our website a lot of times for answers, for services, for information. And we need to provide that in as easy a possible way as we can, because it really is all about the customer. Let's try to make our sites easy to understand, easy to navigate, so people can get in quickly, in and out, and not have to deal with the government so much.